Okay, Kings and Queens, we're preparing to get into our main topic and introduce our international guest. And our main topic today, Kings and Queens, is where has 8 years of Obama left us? Where has 8 years of Obama left us? On January 20th, Donald J. Trump will be inaugurated as the 45th President of the USA, bringing to an end the tenure of Barack Hussein Obama, the country's first black president. Most can recall the unbridled optimism from a profusion of commentators. It was lauded as a dream come true for black Americans who had finally arrived in the promised land. The reverberations were felt globally. Writing for politicsincolor.com, the political commentator Dr. Frank Mwine shared the bold prediction that an Obama election victory would be, quote, the most important event in Africa's history since the slave trade, unquote. His campaign caught the imagination of Africans everywhere, even those that some activists asserted should know better. As Black Agenda Report executive editor Brother GLEN FORD shared in January 2008, quote, we at Black Agenda Report are most concerned with the paralyzing stupor that Obamamania has induced in the black polity. Even committed black progressive activists have jumped on the candidate bandwagon to nowhere. Ford also broke down what he considered the perceptible evils of the Obama phenomenon. Quote, Barack Obama's corporate-made and financed presidential campaign is the product of three distinct factors, all mitigating against black self-determination and political cohesion. One, corporate decisions made a decade ago to provide media and financial support to plight black Democrats that can be trusted to carry Wall Street's water. Two, a widespread desire among whites to prove through the safe and simple act of voting that they are not personally racist and or to dismiss black claims of pervasive racism in society once and for all. Three, a huge reservoir of Jim Crow era activist black thinking that refuses to evaluate black candidates' actual political stances, but instead revels in the prospect of black faces in high places. A President Obama would, of course, be the zenith of such narrow, non-substantive, objectively self-defeating visions. The divergent views among activists were made manifest in a series of debates on whether Obama is good for black people, including two historic events in Harlem in December 2008 and June 2009. Viola Plummer, Charles Barron, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Malik Zulu Shabazz, Dr. Ron Daniels, and Gloria Brown Marshall argued yay, while the nays included Mama Marimba Annie, Dr. James Turner, Nellie Bailey, Dr. Donald Smith, Glenn Ford, Jared Ball, and Diop Olugbala. A key tendency of the yays was less about President Obama's policy positions than his being an international symbol of black achievement and success. The nays did focus specifically on those policy positions, as well as the ostensible reluctance to advocate for African people. However, those critiquing Obama often found themselves dismissed as out-of-touch intellectuals or even Uncle Toms. An important contradiction the debates highlighted, particularly for the activists, was the tendency to give the whole US project a pass because there was a black man in the White House. Cultural warrior Mama Marimba Annie spoke directly to this when she posed the most fundamental of questions. Quote, what kind of person would want to be President of the United States of America? Unquote. The saying goes that the devil is in the detail. So the assessment of Obama should be based on available data rather than perception As the Guardian's Gary Young highlighted in 2012 at the first term, as the first term drew to a close, quote, a Pew survey in January 2010 indicated that the percentage of black Americans who thought blacks were better off than they were 5 years before had almost doubled since 2007. There was also significant increases in the percentages who believed the standard of living gap between whites and blacks was decreasing. No wonder they love the president. There was only one trouble with these assessments. They weren't true. African Americans as a group are far worse off now than they were when Obama came to power. And the gap between whites and blacks in terms of wealth and income has increased under Obama's tenure. Commentator Antonio Moore summarizes the outgoing president's report card, quote, by nearly every economic indicator, blacks are worse off than when Obama was sworn into office. During Obama's terms, black Americans experienced record lows in small business loans and saw their lowest income ownership rates in 25 years. This is along with having record highs in unemployment and experiencing large amounts of wealth loss under his administration. Since Obama took office, the racial wealth gap grew over 30%. Unquote. Conversely, there are those that say Obama's presidency suffered the most blatant obstructions as any in history, accompanied by strident disrespect and racism, not to mention a glut of conspiracy theories. Yet, in spite of all this, some proclaim Obama's terms a success. Quote, President Obama passed bills with benchmarks to rein in the big banks and restructure the floundering auto industry. He greenlighted the U.S. Navy SEAL team which killed Osama bin Laden and made serious progress in ending the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan until the military situation shifted due to ISIL. He created a national healthcare system, signed landmark drug and crime legislation, passed a nuclear non-proliferation deal with Iran, ended Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the military, and re-established relations with Cuba. Among other accomplishments, whether or not you agree with his policies, Obama fought hard to fulfill his campaign promises and succeeded far beyond what the opposition predicted or is willing to admit. Unquote. So tonight, Kings and Queens, we are asking the question, where has 8 years of Obama left us? Did Obamamania reduce some activists to a paralyzing stupor? If so, why and how? Is Barack Obama an inspirational symbol of black achievement and success irrespective of his policy positions? In the plight of Africans in the USA, is the plight of Africans in the USA a result of Obama's policies? Did Obama succeed far beyond what the opposition is willing to admit? Our special guest brothers and sisters are, as already introduced, Brother Mbandaka, and we will be joined in about 10 minutes time by Brother GLEN FORD from the United States of America. Brother Mbandaka, we're going to ask you this, the open-ended question to begin. Where has 8 years of Obama left us?
Well, Tendai Mwari, hopefully clearer than we were 8 years ago. Now that we have seen the unfolding of the myth, hopefully we are a lot clearer as a people. It seemed like yesterday when that outbreak of euphoria engulfed the African world as we jumped up and celebrated, as we lauded and applauded the first black president, the black man in the White House. It was a painful situation to observe then, and it remains to this day very, very painful. Unfortunately, we did not seem to ask the very important question 8 years ago, and some of us still haven't asked that question 8 years on. Who is Barack Obama? Where did Barack Obama come from? What does he represent? We didn't ask the important question or make the systematic or systems analysis that we should have made, because many of us stopped our analysis at this individual, this person, without putting him in context with American history, American politics, what America is, what America means, what the American presidency represents. What does America as a political entity represent, and in particular, what does it represent vis-a-vis African people domestically and internationally? Many of us make those analyses. If we did, rather than allowing ourselves to get caught up in the paralysis of analysis, we would not have allowed ourselves to be confused and duped in the way that we were. And the kind of things I think are relevant in the kind of systems analysis that we should have made is in respect of the American presidency, that all American presidents are selected before they are elected. They are selected by the machinations of the American political establishment, and they are put out there as safe options that the establishment has selected for us to decide, for the public to decide on one or the other. We would have also established the fact that all American presidents, as conclusive information seems to suggest, that all American presidents are related by blood. Barack Obama himself, and it includes some vice presidents, Barack Obama himself is a cousin of the Bushes. I think he's either 8th or 9th, no, I think he's 11th cousin. He's 9th cousin to Dick Cheney. Apparently, he is related in some way, shape, or form, remembering that his mother is a white woman originally from Texas, I believe, which is where the Bushes come from, Texas as well. Apparently, he is in some way, shape, or form related by blood to every single American president since George Washington. We would also know that the American president bloodline also seems to be linked or tied in with the bloodline of the British monarchy. We would also know that Barack Obama had been under the tutelage of Zbigniew Brzezinski, a character by the name of Zbigniew Brzezinski, who is one of the founders of the Trilateral Commission, which is a covert institution that is responsible for much of the cruelty that we have seen that has afflicted our people, much of the injustices that have afflicted our people in America and around the world. We would also know that he was endorsed by the likes of David Rockefeller. What's that character name? His name slips me. Former Secretary of State. Henry Kissinger. The likes of Henry Kissinger. These are people that have a very fiendish history, who are people engaged in American politics, who were among those who endorsed Barack Obama. We would also know that he was funded by corporate America, Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan. All the big banks and big corporations poured money into his campaign. Why did they pour money into his campaign? These are questions that we would ask ourselves. Is it because they wanted to liberate African people? They wanted to free black people? I don't think so. The way they conduct themselves does not suggest this. Yeah, he became the first. He attended Harvard Law School. He became the first black president of the Harvard Law Review. The Harvard Law Review is a publication that is designed to preserve and promote American imperialism, the one who becomes president of the Harvard Law Review is usually one who is put in good stead to occupy a significant or powerful public office. So clearly, Barack Obama has been shaped and molded for a significant public office, and apparently he's been under the tutelage. And you can find footage on YouTube of Barack Obama thanking Zbigniew Brzezinski for all that he has done for him. And apparently he has been under the tutelage of Brzezinski since 1981. No, he was born in 1961, so since he was around 20, he seems to have been under the tutelage of Zbigniew Brzezinski. These are the kind of factors that we need, that should be in our analysis, because then that tells us who Barack Obama is. That tells us that Barack Obama has been selected by the institutions of American imperialism, of American white supremacy, and he has been selected to occupy the office of the chief executive of the American administration and the commander-in-chief of the most powerful and the most vicious the most powerful and the most vicious army that exists on the planet. In fact, we mentioned Martin Luther King Jr. earlier on. Martin Luther King Jr. described America as the greatest purveyor of violence on the planet. This was in 1967, his speech, Why I Oppose the War on Vietnam. He described America as the greatest purveyor of violence on the planet. And of course, the American war machine is the most vicious war machine on the planet. And he was to become the commander-in-chief of the American war machine. Mm-hmm. So that he must have been vetted by the American institution, the American establishment, and considered to be the man who they can trust to represent American imperialist interest. Why we should get excited about such a person and such a character is another matter. 8 years on, when we look at his domestic policy and his foreign policy, we see that African people over the last 8 years have continued to be shortchanged. Obama started his presidency by telling the people of America that there is no black America, there is no white America, there is just the United States of America. And yet what we have seen throughout his presidency is the continued murdering of African people. We see, in fact, a spate of increasing spate of the murdering of African people on the streets of America over the last 8 years. We look at his policy, his foreign policy, and we see that Barack Obama presided over the bombing of Libya, the toppling of the Libyan government. We have our issues with the Gaddafi government. We had our issues with the Gaddafi government. But for the American government to have invaded sovereign African territory was unjust, it was wrong, and Barack Obama presided over that. Barack Obama has presided over the drone bombing of Somalia, and has also supported France in their in toppling the government of the government of Gbagbo, Laurent Gbagbo, in 2011. Mm-hmm. Barack Obama, as the President of America, has presided over these acts of injustice towards the African continent. He has continued the American policy of against Zimbabwe, the economic warfare that they call economic sanctions against Zimbabwe. He continued that. He continued America's domination and degradation of Haiti, and the continued to try to keep Aristide, who was the elected president of Haiti, who was toppled and removed from his office by the Bush, the Bush government. Barack Obama continued to preside over a process to prevent Aristide from returning back to Haiti. So these are some of the, and there are many others. We're going to be interviewing our brother GLEN FORD in a minute, so he will speak to some of these in more details. Tendai Mwari.
Okay, Tendai Kings and Queens, we've got a formidable breakdown there. We're going to try and get brother GLEN FORD on the line right this minute now. So do stay tuned, and we'll be back after this brief intermission. Tendai Mwari.
Yo, Rasta, when we see some black man say we want an American president, them think say them a go skin them teeth and watch him. Yeah.
Mama, come make we talk, oh. Come make we talk about Barack Obama. Papa, come make we talk, oh. Come make we talk about Barack Obama. Barack Obama. Barack Obama.
Yo, hear me now? Originally stepping out of Kenya, Africa, adopted into the cold woodlands of America. Trust me, them you defy every order, turn senator. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat, the gunshot of 8 continent of echo in every corner. How come black man become president in a money maker? Barack beware, Barack beware, Barack beware. Before them turn your name into Barack Osama. Watch me now, in a this time, judgment have come without water. For legalizing abortion in America. A fire!
Mama, come make we talk, oh. Come make we talk about Barack Obama. Papa, come make we talk, oh. Come make we talk about Barack Obama. Barack Obama. Barack Obama.
Yo, hear me now? 9/11 was the beginning of Satan end time. Baptizing black Americans in a Peter Jerusalem, making sure no black man in America would see his crime. In this time, a black American president a great sign. Too long, them disrespect blacks and Africans combine. And black people, flesh and blood, the Ku Klux Klan love to dine. Watch out Barack Obama and intensify your power turbine, or else, Brethren Obama, your dark days will never sublime.
Mama, come make we talk, oh. Come make we talk about Barack Obama. Papa, come make we talk, oh. Come make we talk about Barack Obama. Barack Obama. Barack Obama.
Precious sheep grazing in their territory. Brother Barack, watch out. Some don't love you, you know they only faking it. Brother Barack, watch out.
Tendai Mwari, greetings kings and queens. You're tuned to Afrika Speaks of Alkebu-Lan Galaxy Radio, the only de-brainwashing station. And without further ado, let us introduce to you by the way, before I do that, let me just announce kings and queens that the phone lines are down at the minute. So for those who may be trying to call in, there's no calling in at the moment. You can still text us though on 07 399 359 614. Once again, 07 359 sorry. Oh, okay, right. We're gonna try and take some calls on the texting number. All right, so 07 399 359 614. Not yet. As and when the lines open, we're going to basically interact with our international guests first and foremost. Okay, we are joined, kings and queens, by brother GLEN FORD, among other illustrious titles. He is the executive editor of the Black Agenda Report, kings and queens, and a formidable journalist and activist in his own right. Welcome, brother GLEN FORD.
My brother.
Thank you very much for joining us, my brother. As you were told off air, we're very familiar with your work. We were part of a rather small and ever diminishing band of what might be considered Obama critics, or people that stay true to our principles in the face of a black president, so to speak. First and foremost, most people in analyzing, we haven't had a lot of time to analyze the Obama presidency because most of us have been shocked by the news of the Donald Trump presidency. But in your estimation, what has been the primary impact of the Obama presidency on African people or black people in the United States of America and around the world?
Well, in terms of black America, the primary impact of Obama's ascension to the White House has been to further neutralize black people as an independent political force in the United States. And this has had dramatic effects and subtle effects, and sometimes the subtle effects are the ones that last longest. Certainly they can also be the most dangerous. For example, there is reason to believe that because of having 8 years of a black man as the commander-in-chief of the U.S. aggressive imperial empire, black folks are not as automatically, as instinctively opposed to U.S. Adventures overseas, as was previously the case. For as long as black people have been polled, that is, for as long as the polling industry in the United States has tracked blacks as blacks and not just as part of the aggregate, black Americans have been the most pro-peace, the most anti-war constituency in the country. And that goes back to the early 60s. And yet in 2013, when President Obama was threatening to bomb Syria because of the alleged chemical attacks supposedly launched by the Assad government, the polls showed that although only a minority of Americans as a whole were in favor of an airstrike against the Assad government, of that minority, more black folks proportionally were in favor of an airstrike against Syria than white people. And that has never occurred in the history of polling in the United States, where you have black people taking, even as a minority, taking a more pro-war stance than white people. This is so politically out of character, one has to draw the conclusion that it's because it was Obama's airstrike. So this identification with power is something new in black American history, and it does have sometimes subtle, sometimes dramatic effects on black political behavior.
All right. So one of the main, just to get this one out of the way, brother Glenn. Yeah. One of the main things I've heard, especially since the farewell speech, is all right, he did some things that we don't too agree with, but he's a black family man. He's beautiful black wife and children, and this is supposed to be some symbolic, to his symbolic credit in terms of his relevance. Have you come across this particular tool of analysis, and where do we place this in the Obama legacy?
Come across it, that's all it is. It is all about symbology and defense of the symbology. And of course, President Obama has invited the top of the line of black entertainment to the White House. He's turned the White House culturally black on a number of occasions, and they've been big numbers getters in the black community. They've all been televised, and it gives people the sense that folks have arrived. Yeah. Of course, it didn't mean anything on that night, and it won't mean anything for the rest of human history either. But it's a feel-good time, and folks do like to feel good. And this is a country in which before the 1960s, before the explosion of the civil rights and then the Black Power movements, black folks were invisible as far as the social media. I mean, all the kinds of different communications devices, mechanisms in society were concerned. Black folks were not existent. And so people want to be seen to exist. Right. This is elementary and fundamental, and it's hard to argue against it. But when the people in power scope your game, realize how needy you are, and feed you that feel-good food, well, that means they've got your number.
All right, Brother Glenn. I want to go right back now to 2008, and maybe a bit before that. We have been saying, many of us have been saying that we have to remember that Barack Obama was selected before he was elected. And in your work, I know you have intimate knowledge of that selection process. So for the benefit of our listeners, let's please explain for us, in terms of Barack Obama's involvement in the Democratic Leadership Council and the Democratic leadership as a whole, how that selection they went about selecting him as this candidate for president, and what mission they had given him in his tenure in 2008.
Well, one has to first say that all United States presidents are selected, that both of the major political parties are captives of Wall Street and the major capitalists, and that U.S. democracy simply means the right to choose from a menu that's already been selected. President Obama was on that menu. In 2008, he was not an underdog candidate, certainly not in terms of having the financial backing of the ruling class. He got more money from Wall Street than any Democrat has ever gotten in raw money terms, and proportionately speaking, he was the Wall Street candidate, far way and above the amount of campaign contributions that came from Wall Street that went to the Republican Party. So to call Barack Obama progressive, anti-business underdog is just a damn lie. The numbers tell the tale. You were speaking of the Democratic Leadership Council. That's the right-wing corporate money bag of the Democratic Party that was founded by initially a bunch of Southern white Democratic politicians in the 1980s, most notably Bill Clinton and the man who would become a vice presidential candidate, Al Gore. These white Democrats, Southern, had a crisis in the 1980s, and that is that especially with Jesse Jackson's run for the presidency in 84 and 88, the Democratic Party in many parts of the South was becoming, or already had become, a majority black party. White people had been leaving the Democratic Party for the Republican Party, which had become the white man's party after the 1960s, after Barry Goldwater's run for the presidency in 64 and Richard Nixon's Southern strategy in 68. And so the Republican Party in the South was becoming whiter and whiter and bigger, and the Democratic Party was leaking white folks, and black folks were becoming numerically dominant in many parts of the Democratic Party, and white leaders like Bill Clinton, the former governor of Arkansas, and Al Gore had a problem. How are they going to maintain their leadership of the Democratic Party? And they were white people. Well, money solves that problem, so they created the Democratic Leadership Council, which straight up, not in any under the table way, advertised itself as the vehicle to diminish the growing power of blacks in the Democratic Party and of unions in the Democratic Party. And it advocated that the party go closer to what they called the center, which of course means turn right. So Bill Clinton became the first Democratic Leadership Council president in '92. Bill Clinton is the mentor politically of Barack Obama. And we at Black Agenda Report, who were working under its predecessor, Black Commentator, in 2003, saw back in June 2003 that Barack Obama's name had been added to the Democratic Leadership Council list. That is, this up-and-coming black politician had thrown his lot in with the right wing of the party. And Bruce Dixon, who is now managing editor, our partner in Black Agenda Report, and who had worked with Barack Obama in a 1992 massive voter registration campaign in Illinois that succeeded in electing the first black woman to the U.S. Senate. Barack Obama was the head of that campaign, and Bruce Dixon also attended Barack Obama's marriage. So Bruce knew Obama and had his telephone number, and he noticed that Obama, who was running for the Democratic senatorial nomination at that time, had taken down his famous anti-war speech, October 2002. This is June of 2003. And so both those things happened on the same day, and we decided we would confront Barack Obama. And we spent a month, and anyone can go to the Black Commentator and pick out any month in June and see the result of our interrogation and his interrogation of Barack Obama and his letters and telephone calls to us. It's all documented there. We put him through what we called a bright line test. We got tired of arguing about whether he was a member of the DLC or not. He kept on lying to us and saying that he wasn't. And we decided that we'd put him through a bright line test. And if he passed the test, then whether he was a member of the DLC or not, he shouldn't be. If he failed the test, whether he was a member of the DLC or not, he ought to be a member. And the test involved him answering questions on three issues. Whether, as senator, he would, 1, repeal NAFTA, 2, withdraw from Iraq, and 3, put forward legislation for single-payer health care. Barack Obama actually failed at least 2 of those questions. But as we have told folks many times in the period since then, Bruce Dixon and I passed him anyway. Because there's a thing in the black American community, and I don't know if it exists or not in Britain, where folks are accused of being crabs in the barrel.
It exists, bro.
Yeah, we know it well.
If they drag down some up-and-coming brother just when he's climbing up. And we didn't want to be accused of that, although he was clearly fudging and weasel answering the questions on both repeal of the NAFTA, so-called free trade deal, and on single payer. He was weaseling. But we didn't call him on it. We hoped he would go away, but of course he did not. We're kind of ashamed of ourselves, but we've confessed many times.
All right. So thank you for that breakdown, Brother Glenn. I'm going to now get a bit more specific in the time that we have, and really just give you a few of the main arguments for the Obama presidency being a positive force in today's world, particularly on the black community or the black world, so to speak, and get your response on these particular policy positions. The main one, which I think is definitely flagged up as his defining piece of legislation, is the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. And millions of people have health care today that didn't have health care before 2008, Brother Glenn. So why are people like you not for Obamacare?
If there is one issue around which Americans have been united or nearly united, and I'm talking about a progressive issue, for many decades, it is the demand for universal single-payer health care.
For those who may not be aware, what's single payer mean?
I'm getting to it, brother.
All right.
Universal single payer health care
Go ahead.
has had 60+% support of the American people since at least the early 90s, for 3 decades. That's one of those bright line questions that we asked Barack Obama, the candidate for Senate, about in 2003, in which he gave a weasel answer using the term universal, but left out single payer. Because people associated the term universal with single payer. And he kept on doing that all the way up to and through the 2008 campaign. People understood when he was running for president that he was a supporter of single payer because he used the term universal. And then when he gets in office, in order to head off passage or a very serious attempt to pass single-payer health care, at that point he introduces what came to be known as Obamacare, which is based on subsidies to the private sector. And he shut out most of the Democratic Party from any discussions about his health care plan, because most of the Democrats in Congress wanted single payer. He shut them out and allowed only the most right-wing Democrats, remember, he's DLC, whether he admitted it or not, and Republicans, but especially the insurance and pharmaceutical industries to shape what that legislation was. Obamacare was always a vehicle that was invented by the right-wing Heritage Foundation, that's a Republican think tank, put into practice by Mitt Romney, a Republican governor in Massachusetts, and then adapted by Obama to forestall the passage of true single-payer health care. So he lied to the people, just like he lied to us in 2003. By using the code word for single payer and then pulling a bait and switch on us.
Just define single payer for our listeners.
Single payer means that the fees for your health care come out of a common fund. Basically, it cuts the insurance companies out of the picture entirely, unless people want to go outside and some kind of luxury insurance, but the basic healthcare needs of folks would be paid out of a common fund. Sometimes there are fees attached to it. Every industrial country in the world has a form of single payer. Sometimes fees are higher than others. Sometimes they hardly exist. But the United States is the sole holdout in the industrial world in terms of having this kind of healthcare system. So, this is what people expected, and instead they were served this rickety instrument, which today, since it does not control healthcare costs, it simply subsidizes the usurious thieves of the insurance industry and big pharma. It is collapsing of its own contradictions, and would have been in trouble had there not been the Trump wrecking ball coming into the White House.
So, brother, again, I mean, but you say all that, but why is it then, if all this was a Republican play from the get-go, why are the Republicans working so feverishly to repeal the thing?
Because they have an institutional interest in getting their hands fully on the levers of power, and because they've been running against the Democrat for 8 years. I mean, this is a big contradiction. In fact, that's affected their entire relationship with Obama. When President Obama came in, he surprised everyone by showing his real politics and announcing, even before he took the oath of office, he went before the editorial boards of the New York Times and the Washington Post and told them both, announced very plainly that under his administration, all entitlements would be on the table for cutting, including Medicare, including Medicaid, and including Social Security. Now, remember, at this point in time, the Republicans had been beaten by a landslide. They weren't in a position to mount an assault on any of these social programs at that moment, and they had been, under George Bush during his first term, disastrously defeated when they made moves against Social Security. But Barack Obama comes into office with a plan for massive austerity. This was his plan. He wasn't pushed into it by a beaten and raggedy Republican Party. So this grand bargain that he wanted to consummate with the Republicans is something that he worked on for the first 4 years of his presidency, trying to reach an agreement with them on austerity. He offered them dollar for dollar what they had been demanding, $4 trillion in cuts to the federal budget, most of them coming out of the social spending. But because of their adversarial nature, the adversarial nature of their confrontation with the Democratic president, and because, I'm sure, of the fact that this was a black president and the Republicans are the white man's party and couldn't be seen to reach an accord with the black president, they backed off. They backed off and refused his offer of their terms, $4 trillion. It was the number that they put forward, and he said, all right. One black congressman who was head of the Congressional Black Caucus at the time said that Obama was trying to serve up a Satan's sandwich, although he was prepared to eat it. But it was the Republicans that turned it down. And after 2013 and certainly 2014, what we were left with then was gridlock, in which nothing moved in the Congress. But that's not because President Obama was not trying to give the Republicans everything they wanted. He was in harmony with them. They could not bring themselves to be in harmony with him. But where is our victory there? I don't see any. Okay.
All right, Robert Glenn. In respect of another policy or program that he initiated, which is probably less in the news, but known in black political circles, is My Brother's Keeper, which is an initiative directed at young black men, designed to create opportunities, especially quote-unquote disadvantaged young black men. Doesn't he get no credit for trying to address issues like Chicago and Detroit through My Brother's Keeper?
He does not get credit for that as a government program because it's not a government program. It is a philanthropy that the president used the good offices of the White House to endorse, that invites big corporations to put contributions into a pile that fund private initiatives, all of them concocted and engineered by these same corporations. It's philanthropy. It's not a government program. It's not a line item in any budget. It's just big, rich white folks doing their giving programs at the White House. With the president smiling and Michelle, his wife, smiling and endorsing these rich corporate white people as being such a boon to black folks by their very presence. That's all that is. It's not a program. So no, I can't give him any programmatic congratulations.
All right. Lastly, on a policy issue, for the sake of this particular show, because we're running out of time, we want to deal with the international issue, particularly as it relates to militarization. I'm going to say militarization and humanitarian intervention. Obama won the Nobel Peace Prize. He's been celebrated in Africa. He's been celebrated in some parts of South and Central America. Does he not deserve any credit for his relationship with the rest of the world in terms of being reduced, quote unquote. He starts his own wars and his relationship with Africa and Southern America in particular.
Barack Obama deserves, like all U.S. presidents, he deserves the judgment of Nuremberg for crimes against humanity, and most especially the gravest crime of all, which is aggressive war. Obama has done more, certainly, even than President Bush in waging war against international law itself. His doctrine, and it is the Obama doctrine of humanitarian military intervention, totally guts not just international law, but civilization as we know it. There is no international law without the principle of national sovereignty. But humanitarian military intervention does not recognize the sovereignty of nations. It says that the institution, the international community, which practically speaking means the superpower, the United States, has the right to intervene in any country if it decides that a leader might be a danger to his own people. There is no law involved here, and so they applied it against Muammar Gaddafi's government in Libya, which had not conducted anything that would be considered crimes against humanity, certainly nothing on a large scale, and there was no claim that he had actually committed such crimes, only that he was about to, that he was threatening to. And Obama then set in motion a jihadist takeover of most of Libya and followed through with an attempt to export that same formula of regime change to Syria. And the result has been the death of about 500,000 people and the displacement internally or externally of half of Syria's population. It's about as big a war crime as you can get when compared with anything since World War II, except, of course, what the United States has engineered in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where 6 million people have been killed since 1994, and hardly a newspaper even mentions that crime. But all the U.S. presidents since Bill Clinton have been deeply involved with that, which is the biggest genocide since World War II. And that certainly includes this outgoing black president.
Okay, all right, sir. And I want to wrap up it by being a bit forward thinking now. I saw a show reel the other day that included many, particularly Fox News commentators and pundits, who basically, were going in on Obama in terms of criticisms and so on and so forth. And with the impending Trump presidency, many of us are feeling a little bit protective over our black brother in the White House in terms of defending his legacy and his name, and possibly with the idea that the Trump presidency is going to be catastrophic. Where, in your humble opinion, do we place the Donald Trump presidency in the context of the Obama presidency? Is it a continuation of, a complement to, or diametrically opposed?
Well, of course, it will be a continuity with Barack Obama's presidency, in that whatever new powers accrued to Barack Obama will be passed on to Donald Trump. Now, there's no question about it. Trump is going to be a catastrophe, but he'll be a bigger catastrophe because there was a President Obama. One example, one of the first acts that Obama set in motion after he got his phony health care bill passed was to pass through Congress a bill that allowed for the indefinite detention without trial of anybody, including American citizens, and for that detention to be by the U.S. military. George Bush had claimed that right as commander-in-chief, but he knew damn well that it would never pass through Congress. It would never become a law because the Democrats and lots of Republicans would have fought him tooth and nail, and people would have been in the streets by the hundreds of thousands to keep that kind of power out of George Bush's hands. Right. But because of the charm of Obama, that bill sailed through Congress, and so due process of law really does not exist in the United States if the commander-in-chief says so. And that is one of the powers that gets passed on to Donald Trump, a power that he would not have had there not been a Barack Obama.
All right. This will be my last question for the sake of time, Brother Glenn. And you've been highly critical of the Black liberation movement and the Black activist community, for, as you put it, and let me get this particular quote correct, for being lulled in to or reduced some activists to a paralyzing stupor, in the wake of Obama. And this got underway very early, even before he was actually elected. In terms of being forward thinking now, where do you, full disclosure, we in the studio are ardent Garveyites, so I know we share some differing perspectives on matters like these in terms of political ideology. But in terms of yourself, Brother Glenn, where does the Black liberation movement, the Black activist community, stand? What work do we have to do now in terms of repairing ourselves from the damage that you have outlined has taken place over the Obama years?
Well, in simple terms, we have to fight the power, and that is specifically what was missing, what fell through the floor when Barack Obama became a serious candidate for president. I think you're talking about our writings in the wake of the 2008 election, when folks like us had to witness people that we had thought of as comrades and fellow strugglers, and people who called themselves revolutionaries of different stripes, Pan-Africanists, communists, who, when Barack Obama became a serious candidate, all of a sudden became just Democrats, and not fighters for anything except this particular corporate Democrat and his symbolism. People repudiating their whole lives. It was a painful thing to watch. So if you're talking about criticizing the Black liberation movement, I don't think we were criticizing the Black liberation movement. We were defending the Black liberation movement from repudiation by people who had acted as if they were part of it. And we're now aging. This is a bad way to go out like that.
Thank you very much, Brother Glenn, for that. You know, there's so much more to be said, and I'm sure we're going to be analysing the effects of this particular time period for years and decades to come. But we just want to close by, thanking you for your work and for being, steadfast in standing on certain principles and providing a platform to inform our people at large about matters like these. We give thanks, Brother Glenn. You know what I mean?
Thank you, brother. We just try to be useful.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. All right, Brother Glenn, thank you for your time. We're coming to the close of our show. We're going to get some closing words. But you want to say anything, Brother Leader?
I just want to thank our Brother Glenn for that erudite analysis and insight that he has given us into the Barack Obama legacy. We've always understood and we've said on the airways many times and provide the analysis that we have to the best of our knowledge, that Barack Obama, the symbolism we've used at some point was that he was the worm at the end of the fisherman's hook, and we have been the fish, and we've opened our mouth wide for the symbolism of the dangling worm, only to find when we take a bite that this symbol of hope was really a deadly illusion. So we're very, very happy that Brother Glenn, who is doing tremendous work with Black Agenda Report, has come on this evening to really give us some substance to that analysis. This is priceless, brothers and sisters. So let us be clear as we go forward as to what the analysis, what the legacy of Barack Obama really means for us as African people. And I close from my perspective, as I always do, with the words of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey: unite, organize now or perish. Rise, you mighty African people, for we can accomplish whatever we will. Rumbidzo kunamwari Africa, to the God of Africa be the glory. Tendai Mwari.
Brother leader. Okay, Brother Glenn, we're gonna let you go. Thank you very much for your time, and no doubt we'll interact again in the not too distant future.
Tendai Mwari.
I mean, I'll be there, brother.
Thank you, sir.
Give thanks.
Take care.
Tendai Mwari, we have a texter, and it says, "Greetings, Brother Mbandaka and guests. The murderer who firebombed the party was a planned assassination and sacrifice which affects our families, a very sad loss. I hope the soul of the murderers will be tormented in life and in death, and his seeds likewise shall observe some reflection." That's from Sister Carol.
All right.
Tendai Mwari, Sister Carol, and the rest of our listeners, we will be revisiting this over the next 6 Sabbaths, the next 6 weeks up to March the 2nd. We will from time to time revisit this because we have tended since 2011 to commemorate and reflect on this single worst tragedy that's afflicted the African community in Britain since the Windrush. So do tune in. Certainly tune in next Sabbath. We don't know next week. We don't know exactly what the topic will be, but do tune in, beloved brothers and sisters. Tendai Mwari.
Tendai Mwari. An important notice. It says, Haringey makes history for the wrong reasons. Haringey Council plans to make the biggest sale of public property in the UK, namely Broadwater Farm and Northumberland Park estates for £2 billion, moving 1,000 far out of London. Join the protest, which takes place tomorrow, 6 p.m. at the Civic Centre, N22. That's in Wood Green, 8ZW. Okay, brothers and sisters, that's from 6 p.m. at the Wood Green Civic Centre, N22. Tendai Mwari.
Tendai Mwari. Just in closing, it's worth mentioning that the New Cross massacre and text reminded me that Dylan Roof, the white boy who shot up our sisters and brothers and elders in the Mother Emmanuel Church, has been sentenced to death in America, Kings and Queens. It's worth mentioning that. And so, yeah, we're going to have to come back to that on another show, Kings and Queens. But this has been Afrika Speaks with Alkebu-Lan on Monday, the 16th of January, where we have honoured the life legacy of Baba Patrice Lumumba and assessed the presidential legacy of the one Barack Obama. Kings and Queens. Tune in next week as we continue to talk it straight, make it plain, and bring the spirit of African liberation to our people. We want to remind you of Rise of the Griots this Friday. Shakara Speaks, Rise of the Griots. And also, the big debate was Castro's Cuban Revolution, a victory for African people. Next up, Kings and Queens, at the top of the hour, we have the one and only SG Vibes. Keep it locked onto the Big G. Round here we say, Tendai Mwari. The dynamic monthly sessions addressing all issues of relevance to the African community. This month, we bring you the big debate. Was Castro's Cuban Revolution a victory for African people? Since the passing of Fidel Castro, his life, legacy, and the conditions of Africans in Cuba has been a hot topic of conversation. We bring you an illustrious panel of activists, political analysts, and experts to break it all the way down, including Brother Leader Mbandaka of the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement, Brother Asari Sabukwe of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and Sister Isis Amlak of the Global African Congress. This event takes place on Friday, the 27th of January from 7:30 p.m. at the Ma'at Center, 366A, High Road, Tottenham, N17 9HT. For more information, check alkebulan.org. That's ALKEBULAN.org/ Castro Revolution Debate. Alkebu-Lan no more. Was Castro's Cuban Revolution a victory for African people?